But you talked about, you actually just said you've been involved in building a community before. And I guess we should probably talk about who you are, as this is the first podcast, and what you've done, so people have some context. So
for sure,
can you should probably just start with that.
Yeah, I'll riff a little bit on my background, and then I'll turn the table on you and get your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always like this question because it's like very context dependent. It's like, okay, how am I going to explain myself?
Yeah.
Right? Like, am I talking to a group of crypto people? Am I talking to someone at a coffee shop, like more casual interaction? And like, what's important, and how would you depict yourself to somebody? Yeah, and
I would say just go with depicting yourself to me. Like, if we were just
okay, cool.
If we just met at a coffee shop.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to see is when someone introduces you to someone.
Yeah.
Like, how do they describe you? Like, what follows behind that? And when I was in college, I used to like be a college athlete, and I would get, this is Spencer, he like plays 2 sports. And he's like, or I get, this is Spencer, like he's in my major, or this is Spencer, he's my friend. So it's always like kind of interesting. But yeah.
Hold on. How would you like to be introduced then? Like, what was your favorite one?
Yeah, I like when people,
because I need to know this for when we actually meet people. I have to know. Yeah. So I can say, oh, this is Spencer, he's my friend.
I think it's context driven, because if we're in like a work setting, it's like, oh, this is Spencer, I work with him on FULLSTACK.
Yeah.
And that sounded good, by the way. That's the first time I've said it on a recording.
That did sound good.
Yeah.
That did sound good.
Yeah. So friend, coworker, it's all good. Yeah. So kind of brief background on me. I'm from California. Probably look like a California kid. Definitely got that my whole life with the blonde hair.
Yeah.
Ended up, I feel like I've always been kind of a tinkerer, really into like taking these apart, breaking them down, and then trying to put them back together. I think I drove my mom crazy because I had all these like half complete toys, or like, half broken down toys with little plastic pieces laying around that probably hurt to step on and stuff, or like just like caused a mess. Came from a big family, so really feel like I'm close to my family. Ended up going to UC Berkeley for my undergrad. Growing up, was always kind of an athletic kid. Was really into aquatic sports pretty much. Was a amateur professional surfer when I was like 13, and like used to travel a lot, surf a lot. Kind of had to make a tough decision to give it up so that I could pursue a sport that had an academic path to college, a scholarship. So ended up going with swimming and water polo. And when I was at UC Berkeley, I swam, played water polo there. Didn't really know what I wanted to major in. Ended up going through the major list and actually just scratching off all the things I thought were not interesting. And I thought something science related was more interesting to me. So I majored in cognitive science. It's actually the study of the mind, or trying to at least study the mind and what we know and what we definitely don't know. There's a lot that we definitely don't know yet about the mind. But I kind of wanted to go the kind of pre-med route, was thinking about doing med school after becoming a doctor. Finished that pretty quickly. I finished that major in about 2 years. And so then I was kind of like, okay, want to get into like business maybe, and ended up taking like a lot of finance courses. Somewhere along the line, it was my sophomore year, we were driving over the Bay Bridge with like a couple engineering kids from some courses I was taking, and we were talking about blockchain. And one of the kids was like, Ethereum, like that's the one you got to pay attention to, like that's the winner. I'll never forget that. It was really funny because like, you're driving over the Bay Bridge and you're driving to San Francisco, and I was like, yeah, Ethereum, like definitely heard of it. Like and I gotta go like look into this more because it was a super smart engineering kid that I was in the car with. Went home that night, ended up buying like a little bit of Ethereum. It was like $20 around that time. So this was in 2016, and kind of went down the rabbit hole, started researching as much as I could. And I found myself like more interested in subjects outside school. So I felt like I was like die hard into crypto at that point in time. I was on Angel List, looking at as many deals as I could around crypto. And I kind of started accumulating this portfolio of crypto assets over time. And yeah, there's a big presence of the blockchain community at Berkeley is really big, and met a lot of folks there that are super passionate and ended up building big projects. It was more of a passion of mine. I didn't know that I actually wanted to go directly into that full time. I felt like it was the most interesting subject, and so ultimately, that's why I kind of went full time in the space. Was I felt like, wow, this is really kind of the edge of innovation. I really enjoy learning. I'm going to learn something new every single day in this field, and ended up stumbling into the investment side. I almost worked at Point72. I had a few friends there, and they were pushing pretty heavily on the crypto side. I ended up working for a macro fund out of New York, and they were kind of pivoting towards SaaS and crypto. I led the crypto investing for them when I came out of school. And then now I'm on the project side, consulting with a DeFi protocol. And yeah, I live in Puerto Rico. that's some geographical information, but yeah, that's kind of a summary of a little bit of my background, how I kind of got here, and why I'm interested in crypto and continue to kind of follow the space and be involved in it.
That's awesome. It's so funny because every time I learn a little bit more about you, it's almost a mirror image of my own story. So maybe that's why
that's
we
awesome.
hit it off.
Yeah, that's probably why we get along well. But I'd love to get your background now and learn more about you and why we're doing FULLSTACK.
Yeah, I don't. Okay, I'll give you a very brief. I mean, you basically just said it. So I don't even know if I need to rehash it all, but it was like similar trajectory, right? I was like finance background, but also I didn't know what I wanted to do in college, so it was like finance. Then I was doing physiology as well, so I was trying to like triple major, and decided that I didn't want to go into like medical route, or go the medical route. And so yeah, I always knew that I wanted to do something with business because I just like getting things done myself. I like working by myself. I don't really like depending on other people. So I started a few businesses after college, and sold them. They were like small businesses. I owned a CrossFit style gym in college. So I started that when I was like a freshman in college, and that was kind of fun. We were training like semi-pro athletes and college kids around the town here. And ended up selling that. That led into coffee. So I got really obsessed with coffee for a while, started roasting coffee, traveling all over the world to source coffee, learn about coffee. And I ended up selling that. My wife and I ended up traveling for a few years, and we ended up in Hong Kong or Taipei as a home base, where one email on LinkedIn led to me working for a venture partner in Taipei and Hong Kong. The fund was specific to blockchain. So, he was also working on another project, which I was a part of, which was a blockchain cell phone. So it had like a cold wallet in the phone itself.
Yeah, that's cool.
So we ended up traveling around, and that's where long story short, it's like, that's where I first heard about, they were the first ones to fund FTX and Solana and all those. And so I kind of like just went down the rabbit hole from there. But yeah, that's the long story short. It's good.
Much
times.
Better summary than me.
Yeah.
Much better summary. I was like, when I was 3.
Yeah. So I was born 1995. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that we can get into all those stories later on, but but yeah,
Sure.
that's the overview. And like, that's how I found. So actually I heard about like stepping back a little bit, I heard about blockchain in my coffee shop. There were a bunch of, it was like 2014, and
Yeah.
a lot of programmers, and art, graphic design agency folks type, they work in coffee shops, obviously. So a
In
lot of them were
Seattle.
my,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
not Seattle. You keep saying Seattle.
Dude,
No, Portland.
in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get it. If you're not from the Northwest, Portland and Seattle, almost the same thing. But
Yeah.
we like to joke that Seattle is where hipsters go to grow up. And, Portland is like the little brother where it's still like super weird and crazy, and no one is grown up. That's the difference right there.
I mean, yeah, I just see rain. That's I
Yeah.
just basket them to go together as rain. Like,
There is way too much rain here. In fact,
yeah,
I'm getting really tired of it because it's still gloomy and rainy, and it is June. So, but yeah, that's where I first heard about like Bitcoin was 2014 in my coffee shop. I had a friend who kept coming in talking about Bitcoin, and he was like, Bitcoin had been pumping, it had been increasing in price, from like the early days, obviously in 2009, 10. And one of his friends, he came in and told me this story. He was like, hey, one of my friends forgot he had a bunch of Bitcoin. He was buying ecstasy on the Silk Road with it. He forgot he had it until 2014, and he cashed out and bought a house. Like that's
oh
how
my
much
gosh.
money he had
Yeah,
just left in his like the dust he had left in his Silk Road account turned into a house.
that's
And
crazy.
yeah, so anyway, that's when I first heard. I was like, okay, I need to look into this more. I'm interested in
Yeah,
this because, like, coming from like a finance background too, or like a business finance background, I'm always been interested in markets. And we're talking about this new form of money. I was quite interested in Austrian economics in college, and just different ways to do things. I think that like crypto, it attracts disagreeable people, right? People who are interested in living life a different way, and doing things on their own terms. And like that was already my personality, type. So it was an obvious draw to me to learn about it. But yeah, and that's how
that's
I ended
cool.
up. That's how I ended up here talking to you. Like
Yeah, I know.
if I
Unfortunately for you, yeah.
yeah, all these steps led me to sitting here talking with you about crypto.
It's a heart-filled moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had a similar story with the Silk Road. Like, not that I was on Silk Road, but that's actually like first time I heard about Bitcoin. And then you have those like horror stories. There's a girl I knew in college who has millions of dollars of Bitcoin locked in like her wallet that
Yeah.
she like has no access to. The crazier thing was, I have to look this back up and get back with the details, but the guy that was helping her like with her Bitcoin did not lose his wallet and kept all of it.
Mm,
And he ended up running like a Bitcoin investment firm in the Bay Area. And at one point, like his AUM was like $200 million or something. And then he like kind of burned out. I remember there's this actual article in like, the SF Chronicle or something on him. And it goes through his life of like, they basically, paint him as this like couch goer, like
mm,
crypto nomad. But yeah, that's similar story. My sister's boyfriend in high school was like mining Bitcoin and like buying stuff on Silk Road. And my dad and I probably laughed him out of the dinner table because we were like, yeah, my dad was like, oh yeah, like, uh, like what do you do like in your free time, or like you're working or anything? And the guy was like, oh no, like I mine Bitcoin.
yeah.
And this was like, yeah, 2014, probably around the same time. And now I'm full time in this space. So
Yeah. Yeah, he got the last laugh. There,
exactly. Yeah. He was on The
it's
Bachelor. That was the other thing that was really funny.
what?
This guy, that guy, the Bitcoin mining guy, that dated my sister, he ended up being like on The Bachelorette, where he was like one of the guys.
Okay,
Yeah.
he was one of the guys. He wasn't the Bachelor. But
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah, that was pretty
that's so
funny.
funny.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, it is crazy how many stories there are like that, where like
Mhm.
there's just guys like you hear those all the time. Like a friend of mine, his dad runs this, they install sprinklers in like large commercial buildings, and he had a few guys quit because they were back then like mining Bitcoin out of their garage, and they just made so much money, you know. So I don't know, it's interesting. The other interesting thing about this and about the whole like crypto culture in general and crypto Twitter is like there are so many guys, or so many people I should say, on Twitter who pretend to be poor, or who don't have large followings, or who are anonymous, who are just multi-millionaires, if not billionaires. And I know a few of them personally, and it's just such a weird thing. Like in the real world, you know, quote unquote real world, people generally brag about their money, or if they are not wealthy, they try to be seen as such.
Sure.
Whereas in crypto, you have these guys who just pretend that they live in their mom's basement.
I know.
Or maybe they actually do, and
Yeah.
they're worth millions. I don't. It's just an interesting like environment.
Yeah,
And,
I wonder if like that's like the idea. Like people are still trying to figure out what the metaverse is and like how do you actually define it.
Yeah.
Like that's actually kind of like an example of the metaverse, right? It's like you can be whoever you want online. And so it's probably like pretty freeing for someone who you know is really famous or known as like you know, if it's like a Michael Burry or something with like an alt account, right? Like
Yeah.
like it's probably nice to be able to like think freely and say whatever you want and not have it you know attached to your name.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's moving on.
Yeah.
Tell me about this osmosis hack.
Yeah, I'm still piecing it together, but I was reading a couple articles. What's interesting is OsmoCon is this next week.
Okay.
Yeah, around consensus. It's like the first 2 days of consensus. What actually happened is when Terra blew up, Terra was actually supposed to have a conference. And so Terra had like all of the facilities reserved and like everything rented out, all the equipment and everything. And they were like, okay, it's canceled. And the reservations were still made. So I think Osmosis, the team there, you know, I know Sunny, he went to Berkeley. I really like the team, incredible devs. They saw the opportunity and kind of took advantage of it. They're like, okay, I guess we'll spin up like a conference. And so they spun up a conference, and they actually asked if I wanted to go out there and speak, or if someone from Sci Options wanted to come speak. And it's a bit of a flight for me from Puerto Rico, so Tommy's going, one of the co-founders of Sci Options. But yeah, basically this osmosis hack, from my understanding so far, is that there was an issue with the liquidity pools where if you deposited into the liquidity pool on osmosis, you could actually withdraw 50% extra liquidity. So each time you could just kind of deposit and withdraw a little bit more, or a lot more. And it was kind of, I think the kind of the most interesting thing that I saw was roughly $5 million, I believe, that was hacked or withdrawn from the liquidity pools. Was one of the actual validators for Osmosis, was one of the people that actually withdrew a ton of liquidity from the liquidity pool. I just thought that was pretty shady and kind of interesting, but they fessed to it. And I guess they turned $226 into about $2 million last night. The crazier thing, which I fully skipped, is someone identified the hack and posted it on Reddit. And everyone was kind of like, is this real? Like, what's this like Reddit thread? And people started testing it out. And people figured out that it was real. So I guess there are 5 bad actors that kind of withdrew a significant amount of money. But I just thought it was really interesting that like someone found the flaw and then threw it on Reddit.
Yeah. But I guess then again, it's like, I'm sure people do that type of thing just for the clout alone. It's like, hey, I found this. I want to be the first one to let everyone know. Like the respect that comes with that is probably more important than money, right?
I don't know. I think there's 2 strategies. I think there's like, if you're, you know, a white hat hacker, you're like, yeah, I want the clout. I think if I were maybe trying to like cause enough commotion such that my trail was kind of hidden, like if you were able to kind of rally up all the troops to go withdraw liquidity
Yeah.
from osmosis, like your, $1.5 million in comparison to maybe like the 10 or 15 that was missing, maybe, you're able to kind of get away a little bit easier.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
true.
an interesting. Yeah,
So what do you,
yeah.
let me ask you this. I mean, I've been in the game a while now. I've been in the game since before DeFi was a thing. And from the beginning, it's been like, well, it'll get better. The hacks will get less, we'll evolve, we'll iterate, it'll become safer and safer. And it hasn't seemed to reach that tipping point yet. I mean, obviously, like we saw what happened with the UST situation. Now this osmosis hack and the wormhole hack of, I think that, I don't remember if that was last year or when that was, but
Yep.
do you think it's actually getting better as someone who's in this, like deep in the space?
Yeah, I think I'd love to look at the data for that. I don't think it's getting better because um, I think ultimately it comes down to like eyeballs, right? Like when you audit code, it just comes to like how many eyeballs have seen the code. There's some stuff to do around fuzzing or like smart contract like stress testing. In the traditional like tech world, you have fuzzing like pretty common. I think the problem is, especially in our industry, one that's growing so quickly, there's these projects at launch that might not necessarily prioritize security. And so in a bull market, when a lot of things are going up, these hacks, the notional value is actually pretty high. I would imagine that during a bear market, there's not going to be as many projects launching, as many cash grabs. So I would hope that security would kind of tighten up and that the total dollar amount would kind of go down over time that's actually hacked or stolen. But like you look at like the wormhole funds that were stolen, obviously we were like pretty close to probably peak market at the time when like the wormhole hack happened. So it's a very large kind of number and hard to digest. So I think in aggregate, there's definitely some improvements that have been made. I think there's still a need for, this was an idea I was pushing for a little bit, like a decentralized auditing firm and trying to like incentivize people to come and review code. It's very hard to, encourage good actors. But you have kind of all these like third-party auditing firms that have popped up. There's a few that have been around since early days. But ultimately, it's just another set of eyeballs that are kind of giving you a PDF at the end of the day with any potential risks that they see in your code. So I don't think they've necessarily like gone down over time. I guess my question to you is, do you think that obviously these like headlines grab attention? I think people are kind of posting like people love to eat up these negative headlines where there's these large hacks and stuff. And so crypto kind of gets this like scammy connotation almost. Do you think that that's just because we're early in the life cycle? Or do you think that like over time we'll have kind of more innovative things coming out of crypto that will catch more headlines? And is this like a fatal flaw, I guess? Like, because I'm trying to think of industries where you had monetary value right away that was extractable. And like other emerging industries don't necessarily have like kind of this like value that is just kind of sitting there that could be hacked, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's a few things there that we could talk about for a really long time. It does get this scammy, like you said, connotation to it. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One is that I think that because it is so easy that there are a lot of bad actors in the space. And like if that thread that just came out about, threatening to release all those Telegram chats is true. I don't know if that thread is actually true. I think it's more of just like a FUD thing or like a phishing a phishing thing, but I don't doubt that what he's saying in the thread, if you read through it about collusion and just like crazy nonsense happening, I don't doubt that that's actually true. And I think I've seen behind the curtain enough times to see that there are powerful actors in the space that are they're sharks, they're there to make money, and they come off as like benevolent characters, or like advocates for retail, and it's just not true. So I think that part of that gives crypto kind of like a bad rap. Secondly, crypto is a disruptive technology, and it's threatening to disrupt a massive industry. It's threatening to somewhat disrupt the financial system, right? I mean, it has the potential to do that. Whether it does that or not, I don't know. But when you're threatening to disrupt something so large with such powerful players, obviously there are going to be negative headlines around that. And what's interesting to me is, like, you see these headlines about Bitcoin's volatility or Bitcoin not being a store of value or this or that, when if you look at it, like, they're looking at the last like 6 months. There was something today, someone posted a chart of like Bitcoin's returns over the last 10 years versus the S&P's return. Well, if you look at it from that timeline, then you can see like Bitcoin was a store of value. If you would have bought it 10 years ago, it's a very good store of value. Now I'm not discounting that it's also volatile in the short term. But Amazon was volatile in the early years, right? There was like almost 80% drawdowns in Amazon in the first couple of years. So I think that it's kind of at this point following early stage tech stock, maybe, or early stage, whatever, startup. But I think that you see this kind of antagonistic or malevolent headline theme in mainstream media. Oh, Bitcoin's down 30%. Well, when they fail to mention that Snap is also down quite a bit, that Netflix is down quite a bit, it's like, come on, everything's crashing, and this has to do with like more macro factors, I think, than anything else. I think Bitcoin is just like high beta to the NASDAQ at this point. So yeah, I don't know, man. Go ahead.
Do you think the merge happens like successfully? Like, I feel like that's the only trade people have been putting on. They're like, the ETH merge. It's like the last bit of hopium.
I'm not holding my breath. I'm not holding my breath. I kind of hope it does, because like, I mean, I bought some ETH. I'm just like, at this point, just kind of DCAing into ETH and Bitcoin. I mean, I said this on Twitter, so I can say it here. In January, I basically I'm more of like a macro option trader. If anything, I don't trade a lot. I'm terrible at short-term trades. Like, I'll lose all my money if I try to leverage trade perps or whatever. I've done it before and I did okay at it. Like, I didn't lose money, but at the same time, it just wasn't worth the stress level of waking up at 4 a.m. to look at my stops. I can't live my life like that. So, but in January, I kind of looked at everything that was going on, just from like more of a macro standpoint. And I went almost 85% into stables on the crypto side of my portfolio. And awesome. Yeah, it was nice. It wasn't like I didn't sell Solana at the top. Like, I bought into Solana under $2 and I rode it to like 240, right? I bought more.
It's a good ride.
But hold on. I bought more Solana at like, I bought all the way up. I bought it at 11, 17, 25, 70. I think I stopped at 70. So my basis, like my average buy was around $14 by the time, but I rode up to 240 and I didn't sell it. I was like, this thing's going to $1,000.
I bought into that for a little bit too. I remember. I was like, $1,000 sold, $1,000 target.
Exactly, $1,000. It's going 1,000. But I did end up selling a lot of it around 180 as it dropped, like, because it went 180, then it went 200. I was like, okay, we're going to bounce. I wait, and then went back to 180. I was like, I cut a bunch of it, and I held some of it, but I cut a lot. And so I went 80% into stables, and I've just been now like watching this crash happen, which was what I thought was going to happen, and what I've talked about with like some people, some family offices and stuff, and just like, as the overall idea is that as the Federal Reserve sucks liquidity out of the system, the first thing that it comes out of is the high risk assets, right? It comes out of that, like the far end of the curve, which is crypto at this point.
Yep.
So that's the first thing that gets hit, and then everything else gets hit, as it goes down the curve. But I think that, and I don't want to get into this whole thing right now, but as the Fed and the government realize that they cannot continue to pull liquidity out of the system without a severe financial collapse, they'll have to find ways to inject liquidity back into the system. And right now, it's hard to do that with inflation being what it is. So the idea is, you get inflation, or at least inflation expectations, under control, and then you start subtly injecting liquidity back into the system to kick the can down the road, basically.
Yep.
But if we're looking at like how the economy is acting right now, and you're seeing like credit at all-time highs, savings at all-time lows, you're seeing rates getting jacked up, and housing prices are, insane multiples of average income. It's not a good spot to be in. So I think the government and the Fed know that they can't continue to tighten without dire consequences, and the most dire of consequences being the bond market. If the bond market implodes, then the entire global economy implodes, and we're in trouble. So that being said, like,
fun stuff.
I'm not a doomer. But the idea though is that, in my opinion, I think they have to stop what they're doing by Q4, or at least around Q4. And that's when I think we start seeing things, start climbing back out of this little crater we're in. And so that being said, like, personally, not investment advice, I'm just buying small amounts of Bitcoin and ETH right now, the big ones, a little bit of Solana, because I do believe, like, so this is what people forget, like, ETH also ran up to 1,400 and then back down to about $83. And so I remember watching ETH go from like $30 to 1,400 and missing that, and then back down to 80 and buying it down in the 80s, and then buying it again at like 200. And then it ripped to 4,000. So, and if you look at, I know I'm on a tangent right now, but if you look at Solana's trajectory, like, it's kind of following that early ETH trajectory. Not only that, but Solana is outpacing ETH in developers at the time. So I think that's really interesting, because I think the death knell for any chain is a decrease in, one, interest, two, like, developers and users, obviously. So if people are interested in it, they're developing on it, they're creating apps on it, they're iterating on it, they're evolving. I think that will draw users in and eventually move price. But that being said, like, we've also seen problems with Solana, just like flip it on and off again. And that's a little disconcerting,
Yeah, I think that was a pretty good market recap.
I forgot the question. I just went off.
I also gave you a very like broad question, so I'm happy with the way you took it. I think, like, don't fight the Fed is definitely true. I had similar story. Like, luckily, a great macro trader called me up, gave me a tip of his app. But I think it's interesting. I think what I wanted to talk about was the actual, like, Solana piece that you're getting into. Like, I know a couple of really good traders who, like, Sol's going to $20, and I'm not sure if they went short, but they made a bull call at like 140 or something like that. And I think the comparison, they made a similar comparison, which was like Solana's following a similar trajectory as ETH. And I guess for me, I feel like ETH is like the safe base that everyone comes back to, and they own ETH, right? You feel like, okay, owning ETH in your portfolio. And you talk about like communities and developers. There were a couple of like DAO treasury management solutions that I talked to, and we were trying to I was trying to get like basic DAO tooling set up on Solana. And I like pitched this company that was building it on ETH. And I was like, hey, like, are you guys gonna come like build this on ETH? And they're like, no, like, why would we? And I was like, there's a ton of developers over here, like, it's a growing community. And they're like, the community is just of developers is just so big on ETH. Like that's where we're going to focus our efforts. Like that's where all like the capital is at this point in time too. Um, not all the capital, but you know, obviously like in proportion to the market, a large percentage is there. And I think it's interesting though, because being on the Solana side, I actually never thought I was gonna like make a very direct bet as I have. Um, I was pretty agnostic. Like I was interested in Cosmos and ETH and Solana. I made a levered bet, what I felt like was a levered bet on Solana at the time. I bought a bunch of serum. That's actually how I got into Solana. Like I bought a ton of serum, and it did absolutely nothing. Like the price at least. Like I love the serum guys. I love and girls. I love the serum folks. Like incredible product, incredible team. But when it first came out, I was like, yeah, like this is a levered bet on Solana. I don't have any Solana exposure, but if Solana works, like Serum will work. And so I was underexposed Solana early, and then like FOMO'd in at like $30, something like that. But yeah, no, it's pretty funny. I think that piece though about developers and Sol, there's a little bit of frustration right now. Some people are abandoning Sol, moving elsewhere. But when I go to the hacker houses, when I go to the Solana conferences, the quality of talent there is incredible. Like these are some of the best engineers in the world.
Why? Sorry to cut you off, but why are they abandoning it? Is it a tooling issue?
No, it's the general network issues and outages and runtime errors. Right. So there's computational limits. You know, they're rolling out upgrades that will hopefully help with that. But it just depends on your use case, right? Like how high touch is your product? You know, how often are you actually handling on-chain transactions or you know, like congesting the network. So I think it's a per protocol, per team question. And people are like looking elsewhere. Some projects I've talked to actually had an investor call up and they were like, hey, are you guys leaving Solana? Like, where are you guys gonna go? So I mean, it's still in its infancy. Like ETH has had its fair share of scaling problems. It's actually quite wild. Like when I was like going to like liquidate some of my positions on ETH, I was like, oh yeah, $150 like per transaction. Like, yeah, I'll pay that. It's insane. Like, how is a retail person going to use that? I think the last thing I'll say, like in general, I think layer twos, I'm not the most optimistic person about layer twos. I think they theoretically make a lot of sense, but just from a user's perspective, like I've bridged assets to layer twos in the past, and it is not a simple process. So just to think about like all these different layer twos, all these different scaling solutions, all these different layer ones, like just from a retail perspective, it's really confusing. So that's kind of my general market take right now. But
I think that I don't know. It's what's frustrating to me, and I shouldn't be frustrated by it, but because I've lived through a few bear markets now in crypto, it just seems like, guys, what are you doing? Like, if this is going to work, this is the time to be buying. You know, this is the time to be buying stuff. And like, if it's going to work, if you're betting on this working, then you know, Bitcoin probably ends higher in 10 years. Right. So I think people and like obviously you have to bet on quality. You can't just be buying any random altcoin at this point, because as we know, like a lot of the top 10 coins from the last cycle are no longer in existence. But I don't know. I also tend to look at things in from an investment perspective in the longer term. And I think in crypto we have a really hard time with that. Because people have seen gains really quickly. People got really rich off Bitcoin very quickly, really rich off ETH, and everyone wants to get rich quickly now. And I don't know if that will ever happen again with Bitcoin and ETH, but I would like, my ideal view of Bitcoin is that like I wouldn't care if Bitcoin stayed around $30,000 for the rest of this decade, or if Bitcoin at least went from like $30,000 and appreciated like 4 or 5% every year. To me, that's what a perfect Bitcoin is. It's a Bitcoin that appreciates 5% every year.
Yeah.
It's like the safe bet, right? It's like it should be the safe money. It should find this like equilibrium somewhere and slowly appreciate.
Why don't you just buy the S&P 500 and get 8 or 9%?
I won't buy. I do buy the S&P 500, but in the case, I hold Bitcoin for other reasons, and I can say probably ideological reasons,
Yeah.
because in the case of financial repression, which I've written a little article on, there is the off chance that the government forces you out of different, ETFs and everything else you can think of, and into government bonds. This is not out of the realm of possibility. It would be the last thing to be manipulated, would be equities, but it could happen. And so I just like the idea of having a just in case, because as Nassim says, the fat tails are always a little fatter than you think, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know. For me,
Does
that's
this come
just...
from? Sorry, does this come from like your international travel a little bit?
Yes. Yeah. So very quickly, I have been to 50 countries. The first like really big international trip I did was to Central Africa, and I saw what governments can do to people. And you live in the States, we live in a bubble. And like, no matter how bad you think it is here, and we definitely have our problems, it can be much, much worse. There are just spurious dictators all over the world that want to control every aspect of your life. And I've seen it firsthand, and I've seen how having a free money, or an autonomous money, a money that's, can't be manipulated, I see how that's worked for people. And I've seen how, like, I think for me, like Bitcoin, like the most important thing about Bitcoin and what I really liked about the potential of DeFi is for it to help people who actually need it. It's not what it does here, which is everyone just speculates on it in the West. Like, we're here to make money. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm a free market capitalist, so I'm okay with that. But also, I love that it was built to help the underserved, and, to use a cliche term, bank the unbanked, and do all those things. And I've seen that happen in real time. I've seen it happen in Africa, where their money is worth literally nothing, but they can go to a market and pay for an orange in sats. I've also seen the domestic helpers in Hong Kong wire money back to the Philippines. I think the Philippines' #1 export is domestic helpers.
Wow.
So these domestic helpers go to Hong Kong, they work in houses, watch kids, clean, that type of thing. And they all line up to send money back to the Philippines. I don't remember if it's every Thursday or what, but every Thursday they have the day off, I think. And it is one of the most wild things to see, to walk through Hong Kong and see the thousands upon thousands of domestic helpers that are lining the streets, because they all get together. And it's all these Filipino ladies, and they all like cook and they barbecue and they hang out. Yeah. And the streets are like, they have these walkways in Hong Kong, and they're just lined with all these people. And they're just hanging out, playing games, and having community time, to use the word community, like a true community.
Yeah.
But they also wire money back to the Philippines, and it costs them, it's a like hefty fee to get that wired back, for like what they're wiring. It's it's not a small percentage, and I don't know exactly what it is, so I don't want to say it, but not only that, but it takes like, a couple of days to get there, and the wire might fail. And so for people who are depending on that money, like, stable coins have been something really cool, right? Like, I know a guy in California who, his mother's in Argentina, she needed rent, and he didn't have time to wire her money, so he sent her $200 in USDT, and the landlord accepted it, obviously, and she was good to go. So it's like, that's been really cool. The other cool thing to see is people using DeFi and stable coins to earn a little bit of interest on their money. Now, it needs to be better. Obviously, if they put their money into Terra or into Anchor, they just lost all their money.
Yeah.
But the fact that like a lot of these things that are being built aren't accessible to the quote unquote normie, right? It's accessible to institutional investors. And to me, it's backwards, because there are a lot of products, there's a lot of structured products that could be used safely for retail to earn a small interest rate on their money, instead of having their money being dwindled away in the savings account that's paying 0.05% with another 8% inflation chipping away at it, right? Like the regular person is not earning anything on their money. They're actually losing the ability to save. And DeFi could answer that problem. It could be the answer to that problem. And Bitcoin could be the answer to that problem if Bitcoin was appreciating at a steady rate. But so all that to say is like, that's why I got into this sector in the first place. And when you see it actually happening, when you see it being used for its true purpose, for its true use case, it's actually pretty powerful. So yeah, another long-winded answer for you.
No, I mean, look, I think I saw like a very similar thing, digitally native, money. I thought that was really cool, and being able to send it around the world instantaneously. There's a ton of value in that, right? Like disrupting the remittances market.
Yeah.
Like you talked about inflation. There's some cool DeFi protocols that I've invested in, that I've worked with, that are trying to solve on-chain credit. So you can, provide banking tools to underserved people that you were talking about. So, I think that's why I kind of view crypto and fintech as like occupying a similar space. Like a lot of fintech is like a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
And I think blockchain actually like enables a lot of interesting things in the fintech world. A lot of infrastructure, potentially changing the old payment rails we have, right? So I think a lot of people get into crypto because they see the opportunity there. But you are right in that, like, probably the number one question I get by people that are getting into crypto is like, I want the next ETH. Like, what's the next ETH? And so the Solana trade was actually pretty interesting, because the number one answer I heard or gave around like what's the next ETH was like Solana. And everyone's like, yeah, it had like a really smooth like punchline. It was like, yeah, it's faster. Like you've got all of
Lower
these
fees.
giga brains. Yeah, you've got all these giga brains that are using it, and it's going to be used for trading. And for once, like all these, smart guys in Chicago are actually going to be able to use blockchain because, the Solana infrastructure is usable. So it's pretty interesting. But I think at the end of the day, like humans have very like they're driven by like certain factors, and a major one is like, how am I going to make money on this, right? So like,
oh, you mean greed?
Yeah, greed. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, the other thing I'll add is, you started talking about like large institutions entering the space. I would agree with you. Like I even, I've been through a cycle, a bear market. Not as old as you, so I haven't been through as many. But this one was tough. And I think what's tough for me, now that I've been on the operator side a little bit more, is like seeing all the cash grabs and seeing like the lack of real innovation at times, or just like copycats, forks of like existing projects, throwing them on a new hot L1. So it can be discouraging at times. And I tried to actually like, look at the space analytically and try to think about what's pushing innovation, what's actually driving like real change. And it's hard to like come up with like, you could theoretically see where projects are going. A lot of it's just trading based. A lot of DeFi is very similar. But using this opportunity to try to find like the real teams building innovative products that are going to do well next cycle or next full cycle is kind of part of the reason why I think I wanted to jump into full stack with you. Because I do think there are some incredible companies out there. And I know a handful of them. But we're starting to see, some large institutions. And I think the last cycle we had a ton of institutions coming to the space, and people were talking about like an S curve of adoption, right? And we were kind of hitting this inflection point and institutions are coming in. Obviously, I think you saw the news article saying that Citadel is really kind of pushing into the space. So for me, it's a little bit of assurance that, some of these institutions are coming in, setting up desks, not going away. I had a friend who was at the Goldman desk for crypto. And, a lot of people thought that desk might go away after everything that's happened. It might not come back, but, it still hasn't played out. And I'm interested to see like who stays around. But I think, Citadel stepping into the space is kind of a good signal.
Good signal. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And I kind of follow that as well. And there's that newsletter that you actually turned me on to, Dove Dispatch, which kind of highlights all the money flowing in each week into different like, Web3 crypto projects. Personally, I think that the next big narrative, because I think crypto is right now narrative driven. And that I personally think the next big narrative is gaming. So that's a shot in the dark, but
yeah.
I mean, we've seen like some big funds getting into gaming lately. And I think that gaming is just like it's a massive market, massive opportunity. I think that it's not there yet. It'll most likely be like other already established larger studios creating games that are linked to, NFTs. And that's actually starting to happen right now. But yeah, I don't think it will be like crypto will be centered around gaming by any means. But I think that crypto gaming is going to bring a lot of people into crypto. And I do know there are obviously problems with that. Like gamers in general are like some of the most odd people I've ever met. And it's so weird. And like, this is kind of, I have friends who are just hardcore gamers and always have been. I myself was into some games pretty heavily. You can say it was an addiction over.
I was trying to guess what game you'd be into.
Oh man, go ahead, guess.
I don't even know what your
I'll give you a
era
hint.
was.
Just it was Xbox, like
Call of Duty 1, like early.
No. Close.
Modern Warfare 2. Sorry. Modern Warfare 2.
No. Not
okay.
I never got into Call of Duty. So my main game was actually Halo. Halo 2.
Okay.
Halo 2.
Yeah, that fits you. That suits you.
Halo 2 and Halo 3. And in fact, I played basketball. And so like in college, we had this thing where we would have an apartment full of basketball players, an apartment full of baseball players. And we would just like go till 4 a.m. battling Halo, going hard. It got so intense, and obviously we're all athletes. So we had an A squad and a B squad for in our apartment. And it was like,
day.
Oh man. So there was 4 of us on the A squad and there was like 6 or 7 on the B squad. A squad had like preferential treatment, we got to play more. We all play, we got first pick of the games, blah, blah, blah. If you wanted to try to make it on the A squad, you had to challenge an A squad member and then you would go 1v1. And if you won, the A squad member had to give up his controller.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You should honestly start a league.
And we would order like the 5-5-5 deal from Domino's or whatever, just get pizzas. And we would play till 4 in the morning every night. So it got so intense that during a game one time, I remember a guy, he was like, I think he had a turnover or something. He comes back to the huddle and he's just like, sorry guys, I feel like I just gave up the energy sword right there. And he's like talking Halo during the game. Yeah. It got so intense that, I don't know, did you play Halo?
Yeah, I played it once or twice. Yeah.
Oh,
I
okay, so
played it.
like, do
Yeah.
you know the sound like when you're running low on your armor's running low? It's like,
Yeah.
like I would
Yes.
hear that as I was falling asleep at night.
That's crazy.
Just
That's
in my
crazy.
head.
That's wild. Oh,
Anyway.
man, that's so fun. But it's people like that take to products and love them and can't get
Yeah.
enough of them.
Exactly.
I agree. I had this like paper written. I never published it. It was called like Gaming Onboards the Next Billion Users to Crypto.
Mhm.
And I wrote it last year and just never, published it. But yeah, I agree. I don't have as many good stories. Honestly, I didn't have a TV in college. I didn't have like any like gaming setups. I just felt like I was busy and couldn't find the time. But
You were busy being a serious athlete.
yeah, sorry. But yeah, man, that's funny. Yeah, there was only one story I have where there was like a Smash Bros. League,
Yeah.
but it was on Nintendo 64.
Yeah. Oh man.
And
Those are classic games. GoldenEye.
yeah,
Yeah.
Those were
If they
classic.
did,
But I'm trying to, if anything's an NFT, trying to make everything an NFT in there. But
that's what I'm saying. If they brought back GoldenEye with like an
Yeah.
NFT component to it, that
Yeah.
would be sweet.
I think it's interesting because how many people are like raising or trying to launch a project on like they just take something from the past and then like they sprinkle NFTs on it, or like
Yep.
they like
Oh, that's definitely a thing.
yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I'm kind of that kind of like grinds my gears about crypto a little bit is that it's really all just copy and paste from the traditional world, most of it,
Yeah.
right? There is innovation, but it's not crazy, especially when it comes to finance stuff. So I don't know. I want to say we could do better, but then again, I'm not bright enough to know how to do that. So
yeah, I mean, I think what I will say is I agree with you. I think people need like something digestible. So you'll be like, I'm building this, but in Web3.
yeah.
Right. But a lot of the stuff doesn't need to be built on a blockchain. And I think what's interesting about DeFi and the reason, one of the reasons why I'm really interested in it is like historically you operate in like this regulatory kind of field where you're pushing products, but it's harder to kind of iterate and innovate. So in my opinion, like the composability piece and like trying to figure out like and create, new products through financial engineering, like I think it's kind of a chalkboard. And that's really exciting. Even I've seen like working with projects, you start to ideate on like, well, then why can't we do this? And it's like, well, we could. There's like nothing stopping us. So I think that's the most enjoyable part is like you get to almost like recreate some of the financial infrastructure we have today. That new bill came out the other day and deemed a lot of these assets securities if that bill were to pass, obviously. And I welcome regulation. I think it's good for the space and allows us to kind of have a framework and move forward. But yeah, I'm not really sure how, a lot of these DeFi projects shake out over time. And it's interesting. The gaming piece is really cool. I think you could be right. That's the next wave. Obviously a lot of these projects, like the native tokens have just gotten hammered. I guess one kind of field I think is kind of interesting is like prediction markets in general. I'd be curious, like, you see some like pop stars kind of promoting some of these prediction markets or like gambling markets. Do you have any opinion on like Drake and Staked and
we kind of talked about that earlier. Man, I do agree that that's going to be massive. I mean, it already is. Like Stake is, I think, the biggest online casino on the planet. And the interesting thing about all that was, and I learned this from another podcast, but the guys who started Stake just kind of flew under the radar for the longest time, right? And I think it wasn't until he bought this, it's like this Australian guy. I think they're both like 26 or 28, something like that. Like these guys are really, really young. They had started another, I think they had started another online casino. I don't remember the name before this one, but it wasn't until this guy bought like a $36 million home in Australia that people started questioning what he did and kind of figured out, they put the dot, drew lines between the dots, figure out that he owns Stake. And now they have Drake on there, gambling, millions of dollars and giving away a Bitcoin in the chat and that type of thing. Gambling has been part of our, the human experience since almost the dawn of man, I'm sure. Like playing games and gambling. So I think that people can't stay away from that. Gambling is huge. It's going to be massive online. It already is massive in crypto, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger. The interesting thing about Drake, and I'll say this, is like, when I first saw that, it was like a big thing, like on Twitter, people were like, oh, Drake's online, he's gambling like $100,000 a hand on roulette or whatever. He just won like, $1.7 million. And people were going crazy about that. And I thought to myself, like, he cannot be gambling his own money right here. Like, this is way too much, because he's gambling like, millions of dollars. And rappers, I mean, even if he's worth $200 million, like, it's funny. This other podcast actually was like saying my thoughts at the time, but they were saying like, if he's worth $200 million, like gambling, $10-20 million, that's 20 million is his like 10% of his net worth. I mean, what idiot? I mean, I don't want to say that because someone.
I mean, that's what I do in crypto every day. Not 90% though.
Exactly. Yeah, I shouldn't say that, but I mean, come on, like you really shouldn't be gambling 20% of your net worth, especially in like one night on roulette, right?
Yeah.
Just not, it's just not wise. So
I'm gonna take notes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Should stop.
You should write this down, really, Spencer. You should write this down. So anyway, I figured out that it's actually just house money that they've given him. Essentially they're paying Drake 20 million, and they're probably going to win it back, right? But he could also just be like, oh, I'm going to cash out. I lost 15 million. I have 5 left. And then for one night he made $5 million.
Yeah.
Or he could win. And
there's no way he won, like he bet $1 million or something, or what he won, like
I don't
$10 million or something on that on one roulette. Like I saw the roulette, like he was like 17, like black 17 or something. Like I was like, I just don't have trust in the system. Maybe we need blockchain for this, right? Like, but if we need like some sort of ZK like online casino so that I can't like see where you're placing your bets or whatever, or like something like that. But there's just no way in my mind like the guy goes live and like wins a couple $1 million. Like someone's pulling the strings. And
it's a great, I mean, although it is dishonest. I mean, if they are doing that, obviously it's probably illegal, dishonest, and I do not agree with it at all. From
full disclosure.
Full disclosure. I do not agree with that at all. But if I'm just looking at it from a pure like marketing standpoint, from a strategy standpoint, it is genius, right?
Yeah, it is.
You get Drake to go on there and win a bunch of money, get everyone hyped up, give away Bitcoin, and you're basically just paying him up his fee, to promote your stuff anyway. But it's like it's a good marketing angle, and it works. But I'm not a huge fan of how they're going about it, obviously from an ethical standpoint.
What's kind of interesting about the last cycle was toward the end, I had a lot of gambling folks reach out to me. Like I should have looked at that as like a top signal, I guess, but there were guys who are professional gamblers who made a lot of money that run like investment firms, or they're an advisor to an investment firm and they just cover like gambling. And they were asking me, they're like, hey, what do you think about this prediction market? What do you think about this prediction market? They were specifically focusing on prediction markets in crypto. And I kind of spun on them. I was like, which of these, betting companies like should I buy that are
Mhm.
publicly traded on the stock market. But it's kind of interesting that they all started hitting me up like beginning of this year, end of last year. Um, I mean, the ethics behind it is interesting because yeah, it's like all up to chance, and if they are misleading users, like that'd be a big deal. It's kind of reminds me of like NFT projects launching and
Mhm.
convincing celebrities to like back these NFT projects and giving them a bunch of the NFTs.
Yep.
And honestly, uh, that left a weird taste in a lot of people's mouths because there was one in particular I remember that was super funny where they like accidentally locked up all of the ETH. Do you
Yeah.
remember that one?
Yep.
It was like a big celebrity project. I think he was on The
Yeah.
Bachelor. I don't know why The Bachelor keeps coming up. Like maybe I need to audition. Um, but yeah, it's like some guy that was on The Bachelor launched an NFT project and they locked all their ETH up, and there was like some like fail safe button, and they messed it up. But yeah,
I
it kind
remember
of gives
that.
me a similar feel where you're like
Oh yeah.
incentivizing influencers.
Yep.
Well,
For sure. And that's,
yeah,
I think that also all adds to the I don't know, this scammy reputation that crypto gets,
yeah,
obviously. I mean, I have nothing
yeah.
against gambling as long as everyone knows the rules, and you know what you're getting into. We should probably just
Yeah.
wrap it up here anyway.
Is it been an hour and a half?
I think so. What time did we
No.
start?
Are you serious?
Yeah, we started at 12:30. It's 2 o'clock.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.